There's one thing that's going to make you feel like you're in the Old West while playing Magic the Gathering, that's making a bunch of tokens that are unrelated to it. That's why we've got the perfect commander, Kambal, Profiteering Mayor, and this is his deck tech. Kambal's the new Orzhov Tokens Matters Commander. We're going to get copies of tokens that our opponents have, and we're going to drain our opponents out when tokens enter the battlefield under our control. I'm not really going to focus on the first ability in this deck, but I am going to focus on the second, and we're going to win some games. Before we get into it, partner, I do have the full deck list on Moxfield. So, how are we going to go about it? First, we got to create some tokens. Our first overpowered token maker is Adeline Resplendent Cathar, and our opponents will groan. She's going to make us a ton of human creature tokens and get huge based on the number of creatures we have, and our opponents will love it. I don't want the world to know I'm terrible at deck building, so I had to put in Anointed Procession and Orzhov Deepest Foundation to show that I know how to double and triple my tokens. I'm not a fan of these busted cards, but I want everybody to love me. Benevolent Offering will make the table think we're playing Group Hug because we're going to give away tokens, but we're going to get those tokens too. And also, we'll let somebody with no creatures gain that life because we're respectable people. I've grouped Bitter Blossom and Skrulv's Hive together because they do a similar effect. They're going to give us a small token at the beginning of our upkeep at the cost of 1 life. That way that token production happens all throughout our turn. We all know Black Market Connections is the superior Phyrexian Arena. It's going to let us draw cards, give us treasure tokens, and give us shapeshifter tokens. That's 2 tokens for 6 life. Charismatic Conqueror is going to function as a stacks piece because our opponents can let their stuff enter tapped and we don't get the token, but everybody's so darn greedy we're always going to get vampire creature tokens. We even have some mana rocks that will synergize with token production. One is Crowded Crypt. It's going to give us corpse counters every time a creature dies under our control, and we can sack it and get a ton of zombie tokens. Skyclave Relic has a kicker, will make token copies of itself for extra ramp and extra drain. Genesis Chamber is going to give our opponents mirror creature tokens every time they play a creature, and that means we get mirror tokens. We all get mirror tokens. We all love mirror tokens. Illustrious Wanderglyph is the verdant force that white needed. It's going to give us a gnome artifact creature token at everybody's upkeep, and when we get the city's blessing, they get huge and we can maybe knock somebody out through combat damage. Bitter Blossom already gives us tokens during our upkeep. We might as well get some during our end step as well. That's where Jadar, Ghoulcaller of Nephalia, comes in. He's going to give us the Decayed Zombie at our end step if we don't have one. Lotho Corrupt Sheriff is going to give us a treasure token every time our opponents or ourselves double spell, and double spelling is how you win commander games. March of the Cannonides is going to give us a burst of 1/1 vampire creature tokens up front, and over time we're going to get bigger 4/3 vampire demon tokens. Master of Ceremonies is going to give our opponents a choice. Do we get 1/1 green citizen creature tokens, do we get treasure tokens, or do we get cards? All choices are bad for them. Oketra's Monument is going to make our commander a little bit cheaper to cast, and every time we cast a creature we're going to get a 1/1 warrior to go along with it. Ophiomancer is going to give us a steady stream of little small black snake tokens at every upkeep because we're going to get rid of those snakes we already have so she keeps producing. Revel in Riches is going to give us a steady stream of treasures because our opponent's creatures will keep dying. It's a game of Magic, it happens. And if we have 10 or more treasures, we'll just win the game on the spot. We'd be absolute lunatics if we didn't include Smothering Tithe in the deck. It's one of the most busted cards in all of Magic the Gathering. We're going to get a ton of treasures because our opponents will not pay the 2. Tribute to Hirobi is going to keep giving our opponents 1/1 black rat rogue creature tokens, and then we get to transform this saga and then gain control of all those rats, but we already have rats because we made copies of their rats, then we can sacrifice all those rats to get a ton of cards. Wedding Ring has a unique effect with our commander because when we play it, our opponents will get a token copy of it. That means with our commander out, we also get a token copy of it to double up on that sweet, sweet value. Now that we've made it through all this sick token production, let's get into how we're going to pay it off. First step, sacrifice these tokens. Bartolome del Presidio is a sacrifice outlet that's just a vampire knight that's going to put counters on him. It's not really that good, but it lets us sacrifice the artifacts as well as an added bonus. Carrion Feeder is a 1 mana Bartolome. It can sacrifice creatures to put a 1/1 counter on Carrion Feeder. They'll make him a pretty big threat, hopefully. He can't block though, so we're still taking damage. Deadly Dispute and Fanatical Offering do the same thing. They let us sacrifice a creature or an artifact and let us draw cards, then create a token for us. Malevolent Witch Kite's a dragon warlock that's going to let us sacrifice all of our tokens all at once for a ton of cards and a ton of value. Though not a traditional sacrifice outlet, Skullclamp's too good not to include in this deck. I'd rather trade one of my tokens in for 2 cards, and I'll make that choice every time. Spawning Pit's going to let us sacrifice creatures to turn them into charge counters, then we can turn those charge counters into more token creatures, and then we can drain all of our opponents out in one fell swoop. Viscera Seer is the classic aristocrat sack outlet. It's going to turn all of our creature tokens into scries. Yawgmoth Thran Physician is going to allow us to sacrifice creatures to remove opponent's creatures, and then it's going to let us draw cards. It's too good not to include in a build like this. You may be wondering why we want to sacrifice all of our tokens. because we're going to pay that off. Bastion of Remembrance is an enchantment that's going to drain our opponents every time one of our creatures dies, and it comes with a little token body. Blood Artist is another one of those drain effects. It's going to trigger when our tokens get sacrificed. It's going to trigger even when our opponent's creatures just die. We're going to be dealing out a ton of damage and gaining a ton of life. Corpse Knights are a mini Kambal because whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent's going to lose 1 life, and we'll be making a lot of creature tokens. If you are one of those players that value your tokens more than just sacrificing them for value, then you might love Gothmog Morgul Lieutenant. He's going to give all these little creature tokens Death Touch, so we can't be attacked, and we won't be blocked when we attack. Mirkwood Bats is the absolute all-star of this deck because when we create or sacrifice a token, each opponent's going to lose 1 life, and we might win in a turn or 2 with this thing out. Nadir's Nightblade's a Blood Artist for tokens because whenever one of our tokens leave the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. That includes treasures, foods, clues, etc, etc, etc. Nesting Dovehawk does a couple of things for this deck. One, it's going to populate at combat, so we get another token, and whenever a token ETBs, we're going to put a 1/1 counter on Nesting Dovehawk. This thing will become absolutely massive in no time and one-shot an opponent out of the game. Teysa Karlov does a few things for the deck. One, it's going to cause these payoffs to trigger an additional time when one of our tokens die, and it also gives our tokens Vigilance and Lifelink. Thalise Reverent Medium's our backup commander. At the beginning of each end step, create X/1/1 White Spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. That means we're getting a lot of spirits because we're making a lot of tokens. Our last payoff is Zulaport Cutthroat. This little guy is going to drain out all of our opponents every time one of our creatures dies. Very simple, very succinct, and it wins games. That about wraps it up for Kambal Profiteering Mayor. This token deck is going to be a lot of fun. Life totals will swing very heavily throughout this game, and it has a special place in my heart. I don't think it beats my favorite style of token deck, Food Token, but it's getting there, and I hope it gets there for you too. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.